I'm speaking with Dr. Christian Zepp, who's an assistant professor in sports psychology at the German Sport University. He's also the the head sports psychologist for the national table tennis team in Germany. He works in an applied capacity with various high-performance groups and individuals, ranging from special forces to mixed martial arts athletes, coaches in soccer and running, various sports. It's great to speak with you today, Christian.
Thank you for the invitation, Les. I'm really looking forward to your questions and the overall interview.
Yeah, likewise. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about your background and your training, your academic and professional training.
Yeah, sure. I used to study sports and exercise sciences here in Germany. And after my studies, I went to Cambodia to coach there the national standing volleyball team for the disabled athletes. And once I returned back to Germany, I started working in sports therapy and a rehabilitation clinic. And I realized, well, that's not the way that I want to go. And then I saw the job opening at the German Sports University, and that was my way to go. And then I went back to the university, back to my hometown of Cologne here in Germany, and did my PhD in sports psychology. And that's when my journey in sports psychology, and especially applied sports psychology, really started. I did the training that's necessary here in Germany for, or the equivalent to the CMPC here in Germany. And right now I'm working in applied sports psychology for about 9 years. That's been pretty much the journey so far.
Right. What got you interested in psychology? You mentioned that you had experiences kind of working with disability sport in Cambodia and then also in a sort of physical therapy setting, but you found that sports psychology was more to your interests. Why was that?
During the time when I was an athlete myself, well, I consider myself an athlete today still, but when I did triathlon, for example, I realized how important my mind is. I experienced the importance of the mental side of the sport, because once you're out there on the road or open water swimming, you realize, well, you're alone there. And especially when you're practicing alone or during those long endurance competitions, you're out there alone. There's no one you can talk to apart from your front wheel, for example. Mm-hmm. And I just realized how important it is to be psychologically strong, so to speak. And that's something that really got me interested in the mental game in sports psychology. And then when I was a volleyball coach for a girls team back then in the early 2000s, that's when I really tried to apply my knowledge that I gained from doing triathlon with a team. So I wrote stickers on their bottles while they were warming up. So I can, whatever it was. And ultimately we won the game and became champion of our league. And I thought, well, it's working. Well, maybe it wasn't something else. Most probably it was something else. But that's when I realized, all right, it's not only important to me, but it's also important to other athletes. And that's how my interest for sports psychology slowly developed.
Yeah. And, it sounds like you kind of realized in working with the team, the value of the self-talk and the things that athletes, or the messages that they were giving themselves in being mentally strong. Is that the case?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not only the self-talk during competition and training. It's also dealing with adversities, for example, dealing with challenges, overcoming obstacles on my way, maybe injury, for example, or just like it is right now, the situation around COVID-19. I'm not able to practice. How can I stay motivated? What is it that I can do? I think it's all in my mind in the very end.
Yeah. So speaking of the current circumstances with COVID-19, maybe you can talk about some of the challenges that you alluded to that athletes have experienced and how you've helped them, or what some of the things you've been doing to manage some of the current circumstances are.
I think the challenges really, they differ. There's a wide range.
Yeah.
When we're talking about some of the Olympic athletes, for example, they had to deal with the Olympics being canceled. Some of those athletes were happy that they got canceled because, well, first of all, now maybe I have some more time to practice to get better for next year because I'm already qualified. I will be qualified next year as well. So I have more time to practice. Some others said, well, it's good that it's been canceled because in other countries, for example, you were able to practice and to train, and athletes in Germany weren't allowed to train. Yeah. So it would have been a completely different situation for athletes from different countries. So they were happy that it got canceled. Others said, it's I really do not know how to deal with the situation because I usually planned those Olympics to be the last of my sporting career. So now I have to train one more year. I have no idea where to get that motivation from. So those are, for example, examples for challenges from those Olympic athletes. Other athletes on the lower levels, they had problems motivating themselves because they said, well, why should I train right now? There's no tournament whatsoever on the horizon, neither nationally nor internationally. So why do I train? Why do I practice? Others had major difficulties structuring their day. Right now, no school, no training. Their training structured their week. There is nothing at the moment. Now I'm playing Fortnite until 4 a.m. Getting up at 1 p.m. maybe, checking my emails if there is any homework I have to do. I'm feeling exhausted whatsoever. So completely different situations among all of those athletes. Some athletes, young athletes, deal very well with the situation. Others have major difficulties, and the same is true for the other extreme, the Olympic athletes. So very diverse.
Right. Those are some wonderful illustrations of the varied nature of the challenges that athletes may experience depending on their level of competition, or maybe just specifics to who they are as athletes and people in general. And you mentioned that point about sort of challenge or uncertainty, and certainly in terms of injury, I guess, of course, there are many uncertainties with injury recovery. Maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the uncertainties that the injured athletes you've worked with have expressed or articulated.
I think, again, they're very diverse. They are very, very diverse. Some uncertainties they have is, will I be as fast as I was after my recovery? Another uncertainty is, how long will the process take? Will I be faster than the physicians or the physios tell me? Can I trust the physicians? Can I trust the information I'm receiving from my physician, from my physiotherapist? Can I really trust them? That's a major issue I usually have, or that I usually experience when I'm working with athletes in that capacity. What can I do during my recovery? That's another uncertainty. Is it able to practice some technical things in my sport? Maybe if I'm a soccer player, for example, and my leg is injured, can I practice with my upper body?
Yeah. So
just one example. Yeah.
Sure.
Or another uncertainty is, will I lose my spot on the team? Is there anyone who will support me from my team, from my club, or does everybody just let me down? Nobody will talk to me again. Yeah. Am I a burden for others? Is something else that one athlete told me once, because now I'm not able to complete my daily activities on my own. I can't go shopping. Now I have to ask someone else to go shopping for me or cook for me. So very, very diverse uncertainties.
Right. And so I guess the strategies you use to manage or help the athletes cope with those diverse uncertainties, do they vary depending on the nature of excuse me, the challenge or the uncertainty that the athlete is facing? Or do you have like a certain approach, I guess, maybe that you use in your work with injured athletes?
Yeah, the approach that I usually take is to use the sense of coherence from the salutogenesis from Antonovsky.
Okay.
And in the sense of coherence, I think, it's there are three major pillars, and it's the first thing is comprehensibility. So, do I understand the nature of my injury? Do I understand why it happened? Why it occurred? Do I understand what the physicians will do or did maybe during a surgery? Do I understand what the physiotherapist will do? Do I understand the rehabilitation process? So that's a very important point. And many studies have shown that understanding that process or the different processes. So first of all, how did I got injured? What happened during the surgery, if there is one, and what do I do next, is absolutely crucial for athletes to stay motivated and to adhere to the recovery plan that's been made up in the first place.
Right.
So working on the comprehensibility is very important.
Yeah.
Another aspect, so the second pillar then, is the manageability. So what can I do in order to improve the situation? What is it that I can do right now? There's one athlete, he injured his knee 2 weeks ago, and his surgery was 6 days ago. And then we discussed and we talked about right after the surgery, and even in preparation for the surgery, what is it that you can do afterwards?
Yeah.
Where can you focus on? What little exercises are you able to do? Maybe not with your injured knee or injured leg, but maybe with the other leg. So talking of mirror training, using the mirror neurons to practice on the other side as well. So manageability, what is it that you can do to improve the situation? And maybe then he came up last week, for example, with improving his nutrition, his eating styles.
Right.
And with eating, we can improve the injury or the recovery process as well. And then the last pillar of the sense of coherence is the meaningfulness. So what is the what is it? Why is the situation meaningful? what is the good inside the situation right now? Why is it beneficial right now for me to be injured? And interestingly, usually when I ask the question, what do you think, what's the benefit of being injured right now? Usually the athletes look at me and say, well, sorry, Chris, but are you serious?
Yeah.
And usually after a few weeks, a few months, they can say, well, yeah, it's been good for this or that. One example, 2 years ago, there was an athlete, a junior elite athlete who was on the threshold to the pros team, and he was part of the training from the pros already, and it was pretty clear that he might become a pro very soon. And then during the winter break, unfortunately, right before they went to winter training camp, he got injured. He injured his right ankle. And then I met him in the physio where he was sitting on the bike, just very slowly riding the bike, just to stay fit a little. And I was talking to him, and then I asked him, all right, so how do you feel right now? What do you think about the situation? And interestingly, he said, well, actually, to be honest, it's great that I'm injured right now. Mm-hmm. And it was January. And it was clear that if he would have attended training camp, that he eventually would have played in the Bundesliga afterwards with a pros team. And he said, well, no, it's great that I'm injured right now, because right now, being injured gives me the time to study for my final exams at school. Yeah. And if I wouldn't have the time right now to study for the final exams, I have no idea how my final exams will go.
Right.
So it was meaningful to him.
Yeah. So I love that framework. And you know, when you talk, I guess, about questions, it sounds like this framework is sort of a rhetorical one where you're going and asking athletes some questions to elicit their understandings or their perspective on what they're experiencing. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So what I try there is to help them explore themselves, and understand themselves a lot better and come up with their own ideas.
Right. And I imagine that's helpful for eliciting discussion and conversation about what they're experiencing as well. Mm-hmm. In terms of the point about the meaningfulness, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned, you know, like sometimes it's only with the benefit of a bit of time or distance that the athlete is able to see some benefit mm-hmm. from what they're currently experiencing or the experience mm-hmm. as a whole. Also, I guess in terms of the comprehensibility, that first kind of theme or pillar in the sense of coherence model, you mentioned understandability. Would you say that for the injured athletes you work with, that there are things that they're lacking an understanding about?
I think there are a lot of things that they are lacking. What I see, and that applies to almost every age group. It's not exclusively in junior athletes. It's also in senior athletes. Many athletes really do not understand what the doctor told them. They do not understand the name of the structure, the structure in their body. The doctors told them. They don't understand if the physician tells them something, because usually the doctor is in and out within a few seconds. Sometimes they don't even understand what the physiotherapist tells them. So why is it that I have to do that exercise? They just don't know. And they do it for a short period of time, but then they just forget about it because they do not know why it is important to do it. Mm-hmm. So one thing that we tried to implement in one club in the past was to have further education for physicians and physiotherapists to explain them the need for being completely open and honest about what happened, why did they do it during the surgery, for example, and why it is so important for the athletes to adhere to the recovery plan and to the process that has been developed specifically for them. And in my experience, usually athletes, when they're not feeling well during an injury and they contact me and we're talking, usually they say, if I ask them, well, do you know why they do it or why you have to do it? No, I don't.
Yeah.
So
So
maybe
is
they
that
don't listen or they don't understand it.
right? Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. Like, where
Yeah.
is that lack of understanding coming from? Is that on the part of the athlete? You said like maybe the athlete isn't listening, that the physiotherapist, for instance, is giving them the information, but the athlete just doesn't listen or doesn't ask for clarification? Or is it the case that, and maybe this is hard to generalize, but that they're just not getting that information? Because you said sometimes the physician is like coming in and out quickly, and maybe they only have a few minutes, or they speak briefly with the physiotherapist, and they're not getting a clear, detailed explanation about why their injury occurred, or what's happened to their body structures, or sort of what the recovery
Yeah.
will entail. What's the issue that's causing this lack of understanding, would you say?
I have no idea. I think it's, but I believe it's everything.
Yeah.
It really depends on the athlete. Most definitely, there have been athletes who really aren't able to understand it, which is okay from their side. But then it's the job of the physician to bring the message across in a way that the athlete really understands it.
Right.
On the other side, it's most definitely our job in sports psychology to encourage athletes to ask questions.
Right.
Sometimes they're afraid to ask because they do not want to be seen as too dumb to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to deal with that situation as well. So we have to encourage them to ask questions.
Yeah.
I think the problem, as you say, is on both sides.
Right.
One's on the side of the physician or the physiotherapist, and on the side of the athlete. So
Sure.
we have to educate them both.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, almost kind of regardless of maybe why there's a lack of understanding, it sounds like it's important that the athlete is encouraged to ask questions, to make sure that they walk away understanding what's happened to them, what caused the injury, what's healing progressions will occur. But it's also important on the other side to, as you say, maybe speak to physicians or physiotherapists and make sure that they see or appreciate the value of educating the athlete, of giving them that information if maybe they're not. And so just on that point, when athletes get that information, or when they have the understanding or the comprehensibility, what, if any, impact does that have on their recovery or their healing, their progression through rehabilitation? How is
Usually,
that?
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. Usually, I think it enhances their motivation to really adhere to the recovery plan.
Yeah.
Because they understand why this plan has been developed for them, and then when they understand this, they accept that plan and they adhere to that plan. So I think it enhances the adherence to the plan that has been laid out for them.
Yeah. So when they have that rationale or that understanding of why they need to do something, then they're more
Yeah.
likely to, I like your term, accept or maybe kind of buy into the program.
Mm-hmm.
You also mentioned, Christian, the point about a lack of trust. And I'm wondering if when the athlete gets that information or that education, does that facilitate trust in their treatment provider?
You mean when they receive the information about
Yeah.
why they do what they do.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think what I usually see in athletes who do not trust their healthcare providers, it is they do not take the time to really explain what happened and what will happen and how they try to mitigate uh, difficulties or problems, or how they will deal with the situation. Um, it will definitely, in my experience, it can only enhance trust, improve the trusting relationship between both of them, if the physician takes a minute more time
Yeah.
to explain what they do, why they do it, and how they
Right.
will do it.
Right. And in terms of that sort of how they'll do it and what the progressions are, I wonder if that gets to your second theme or point in your sense of coherence approach in terms of manageability. So
Mhm.
does that facilitate a greater sense for the athlete that this is manageable when they get that
Yes.
information or that education?
Yes, absolutely. Because then they know also for themselves where to look for more information. All
Mhm.
right, this is the goal. And then I can try to understand and try to learn more about how to reach that goal.
Yeah.
And the how to is then how do I manage the situation?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sort of an understanding about the steps and how to recover, how to progress through the recovery is beneficial. And you mentioned
Yeah.
that idea of motivation, and maybe you can speak a little bit more about the relevance of motivation to an athlete's injury recovery.
I think it's motivation is absolutely essential. If there's no motivation, why I should do this exercise or um, yeah, take my pills, whatever it is in the situation that is necessary, um, then I don't reach my goal. So it's absolutely crucial, I think, to have short-term and midterm goals. So especially when we're talking about a serious injury, for example, you're out of the game for 3 or 4 months. It's absolutely important to have those short-term goals. What is it that I want to reach by next week? What is it that I want to reach or be able to do in 2 weeks? What is the goal for the first 4 weeks? And by setting those milestones for and together with the athlete. So I'm not setting the milestone for the athlete. We're doing that together. We're doing that mutually. Um, we're given some orientation to the athlete. And I think that is very important, especially in the situation of uncertainty due to the injury. Some orientation for what do I work towards to.
Yeah.
So just like a compass. And having this compass really helps the athlete navigate through the jungle um, of information that they receive and anxiety they experience and feedback they get from others, and having those small milestones just sets the path for um, recovering a lot faster.
Yeah. So I like your analogy of the compass or the orientation and how those milestones really kind of set the orientation or help articulate that path towards recovery. And but also you mentioned that idea, Christian, of like why the athlete is coming back. And so would you say that motivation isn't just about like how much energy the athlete is putting into their recovery, but also the athlete understanding why they're coming back and what's driving them to return?
If they want to come back,
Yeah.
um, because that's something I've seen in the past already, maybe even during the current situation with COVID-19. It's pretty much the same thing. Um, do I really want to put that stress and pressure on me again in the future that I experienced while being an athlete?
Yeah.
Do I really want to do that? So that's a question two athletes asked themselves in the past while being injured, while being in the recovery process. Do I really want to be a high performing athlete in the future again?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there comes the point of why do I do this? And I think it's absolutely crucial to deal with that question. Why do I want to come back? Is it because of the Olympics that I want to attend next year? Or is it because I have to, I'm making a living out of that, so I have to earn money? Is it because I can't do something else? I never learned something else, so I have to get back into the sport.
Yeah.
Is it due to my identity, and maybe my identity is only being an athlete? So why is it that I really want to go back? Or is it because I just enjoy being out there on the field, on the pitch, on the track, or swim in the waters? Why is it that I'm going back, and why is it that I'm enjoying my sport? I think that's absolutely important to deal with this question during the rehabilitation process. For some athletes, it's not a question at all, because they say, I want to come back as fast as possible. Hashtag come back stronger, which I don't like personally. I think we can change that.
Yeah.
But that's usually not a question. Why do I want to come back? Because they just don't ask that question to themselves. But
Right.
for other athletes, it's absolutely important.
Yeah. So I guess that's really interesting, your point about the first question for some is really, do I want to, rather than just the assumption that yes, and I want to just come back stronger. But the first question for some is really about, well, is this important for me? Is this something I want to come back to? And then it sounds like you're suggesting the next question is, well, if I do, then why, and what's driving me? And I know some of the research that I did years ago was asking kind of that question about, well, what is energizing and underlining your return to sport? And I think, to your point, we did find that there were some differences in terms of the athletes who were more intrinsically motivated, those who were doing it because they just enjoyed their sport, they liked mastering skills, they maybe wanted to participate on their team, in terms of their perception of how they performed once they actually returned. So those who came back for more intrinsic reasons seemed to have more positive performances or experiences once they returned, whereas those who were maybe doing it more for the pressure you mentioned, or feelings like guilt, that they seem to have more anxiety upon their return, or seem to experience more apprehension about their performance. So I thought that was really interesting that you mentioned that, sort of like, those drivers may be important. And I guess maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the, I guess, types of pain, either physical or psychological, that an athlete experiences in the case of injury.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very interesting question. The different types of pain. One pain, and maybe it's not directly answering your question, but one pain that comes to my mind is simply the question: Will my coach call me, or my coach doesn't call me, and that leads to pain, because I'm not important. I'm not an important person. Something else is something I already mentioned this. So pain of losing my identity. I'm not the one I was before, and that hurts. Or maybe I'm not as strong as I expect it to be, because I never got injured in the past, and I never thought about me experiencing an injury. So that hurts my identity. Maybe the pain of feeling lonely, not only because my coach doesn't call, just because also I can't leave my apartment, or I can't meet with friends, and that causes pain for some athletes.
So it sounds like, thinking of pain in its broadest sense, beyond just, okay, well, physically there's discomfort because I've torn a ligament or broken a bone, but there's also maybe the psychological pain associated with loss or removal from some self-defining activity. And again, like, does the model that you talked about earlier, is that something that comes to bear, those questions about comprehensibility, manageability, meaningfulness? Does that relate to an athlete's sense of maybe psychological pain?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then we try to understand where does that feeling of pain of being lonely, for example, come from? Or where does that feeling of being neglected by my coach come from? Not from a evolutionary perspective or developmental perspective. Most definitely not. But maybe we're talking about some anxiety there that we're projecting into the past, or right now into the present moment. So helping to understand, why do I feel lonely? And maybe then to understand, well, I do not need to be lonely, because I have this friend and my parents care for me and go shopping for me and cook for me, whatever it is. And then maybe the injured athlete learns that he or she can be grateful for the situation right now, because it shows her, for example, that there's someone who's caring for her. And then again, the situation gets something meaningful, and she maybe also learns to manage the situation better in a different way.
It's interesting because actually just before we were chatting, Christian, I was speaking with a former military veteran in Iraq who lost her leg, and then when she was recovering back in the United States, she, talked about how she actually was grateful because she was surrounded by other people who had experienced loss of both legs or eyesight, or and so sort of having that frame of reference, while it was of course challenging to deal with that loss of her limb, was also something that, relative to others, she could sort of frame in terms of something that she was grateful for, that, she was still doing okay, relatively speaking. You also mentioned this idea, or allude to the notion of athlete being aware of different sources of support. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about the relevance of having social support when you're injured.
I think just like with the motivation part that we talked about a couple of minutes ago, the social support system is absolutely crucial for athletes. Speaking of the athlete who got injured 2 weeks ago and had his surgery last week, he had to get to the hospital and get back from the hospital back to his apartment. So you need someone who drives you there, who takes you there, who takes care of you. It's absolutely important to have such a support system ready. And I truly believe that it's so important also in sports psychology, not only to focus on the performance development and on the personality development and on psychological health. It's also important to help the athlete understand what is really meaningful in life and what is important if there are certain setbacks, and what they need then and what they anticipate what they might be needing in such situations. If you start talking about, or if you're experiencing a difficult situation during a competition, and this is the first time that you are thinking about how do I deal with, or how could I deal with the situation right now, it's too late, then you're not prepared. And that's the reason why I usually ask before major competitions really start, what are some of the worst things that could happen during the competition? And usually the athletes, if they don't know me yet, they say, well, Chris, I really do not want to talk about all those things that could go wrong. I will talk about the good things that could happen during the competition. And I say, yeah, obviously you want to be talking about the good things, but that doesn't prepare you for the competition. And that's the same thing with potentially experiencing an injury in the future. What would you need then in this situation? And one of the most important things is have a social support system ready. Know whom you could talk to, know whom you can could phone or call for support. Give you a lift to the hospital or to the physiotherapist, wherever you might need to go. So the social support system, only on this function, from this functional perspective, is absolutely important. And then most definitely we have the emotional support that is important there. Someone that we can talk to, someone who simply listens is there, and who is able to consume our anger, frustration, pain, discomfort, whatever we experience at this moment.
Right. So it sounds like different types of support are important or needed, but also just in reflecting on your comments, Christian, it sounds like you ask athletes to engage in some philosophical reflection about their injury, and to that point about the meaningfulness, that you're asking them to think about questions that maybe require them to probe in a more sort of thoughtful way. Would that be accurate?
Yes, absolutely.
You also mentioned that point that sometimes it sounds like it irks you, or you find, I think you said, a bit frustrating, that comment about like hashtag come back stronger. Maybe you can just talk about why you find that annoying, if that's the right word, or what is it about that sentiment that maybe you find less than helpful?
It's just a catchphrase, it's something one athlete used in the past, and then another one uses it, and it's got nothing to do with my personal identity. It's got nothing to do with my personal situation in that moment, in my circumstances, and I just don't like it. Come back stronger. What does it mean? What is come back stronger? I want to be stronger every day. So if I wake up tomorrow, I want to be better tomorrow. So I don't need an injury for that.
Sure.
And I have no idea what the a better hashtag could be in that situation.
Right.
Most definitely not.
Yeah.
But what I usually like to say is, no, I'm not coming back stronger. I'm coming back in a different way. I'm coming back different, because I won't be strong. I won't just be stronger afterwards. I have no idea if I will be stronger afterwards. Most athletes are stronger afterwards, but some of them aren't. But they are different. And it's pretty much the same with the current situation around COVID-19. Some people are talking about the new normal. I have no, if it's a new normal, it's different right now. And the same applies to it applies to injuries. I will be different afterwards, and that's something I usually say to athletes. I usually say, I never wish that. I hope that no athlete ever experiences an injury. if that would be possible. And at the same time, I wish that everyone experiences some kind of injury, because it shapes the personality of the person behind the athlete.
Right.
It changes the person. And again, referring to the meaningfulness we've discussed earlier, it's always meaningful to experience such a situation. It's always meaningful to experience an injury. And I believe if I experience an injury, I will be different afterwards. And that's something that I can identify a lot more and a lot better compared to come back stronger. I want to be different afterwards. I want to be a different person, maybe a better person.
Yeah. So it sounds like when you kind of frame the discussion around this point about coming back differently, that it maybe raises questions or discussion about transformation or change, and the fact that, you know, one won't just be stronger, some cliche that's kind of meaningless, but enable some discussion about, well, what might coming back different look like? And also, I think, interestingly, to your point about manageability, that, you know, also maybe this point or theme issue, I guess, about coming back different may help with the manageability piece, I could imagine, because you're thinking, okay, well, you know, you said earlier, what could the athlete be doing, right? And then so maybe, well, before maybe there was a weakness or in a certain area, or maybe they're sort of analyzing their strategy or technique or biomechanics or nutrition you mentioned. And so they're not coming back the same, or they come back different, but maybe it's in some way better, for lack of a better term, because they've addressed some of these other issues or managed those other things. Those are great points and insights. So not what I'm saying, what you're saying. Maybe you can talk just a little bit about how athletes make decisions about when they're ready to resume their competition or sort of get back onto the field of play.
How do they make the decisions? That's a very good question. Unfortunately, I believe that most of the athletes make the decision only based on the calendar, on the time that's been passed since they experienced the injury, or based on the time that went by since their surgery. Unfortunately, I believe it's in most cases only the time factor. And at the same time, I also see many athletes come back to play, to training when they don't experience any pain, which is, I think, a problem, because I think it's a two-sided sword. On the one side, you have to push through some of the pain when you are injured, and at the same time, pain tells us something. Pain shows us to be cautious, for example, or not to push too hard. So it's a very thin line that athletes have to walk there, and then again they decide, can I go back to training based on the feedback from the physiotherapist, from the practitioner? So they have to trust them. So we're coming back to that relationship, and then they're coming back if the coach says, well, next week you're back on the pitch. And then they say, well, I have to, otherwise I will lose the spot in the team. And I think especially the last point is not a very helpful decision for coming back to training.
Right. You mentioned the term, or you use the term, unfortunately, athletes usually base their decisions on time factors. So why, unfortunately?
Unfortunately, because usually the recovery process has been timed by some healthcare provider or by the coach, and then they say, well, it's been 8 weeks since my surgery, so then today I should be able to go back to training.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they listen to this or they look to all exclusively to the time frame and do not listen to their own body.
Right.
The physiotherapist said, I can stand on the pitch today, so I'm going on the pitch today.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I'm experiencing some pain, maybe that I'm not talking about with the physiotherapist, because today is the start of the 9th week and I'm going back to training today.
Yeah. So it almost sounds like once the athlete gets that time frame, that sort of then their expectations about return are then framed primarily by that number, like, okay, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And that focus may, you're suggesting, I think, do a disservice to the athlete.
Yes. And now I'd like to add some more spice to that.
Yeah.
Because what happens, and that's exactly the thing, that the situation with the athlete that I used to talk before as well. What happens if there are 3 opinions about the time frame? So there's the first physician said it's 2.5 months until you're back on the pitch. The other physician said it's 2 months, and the physiotherapist said it's 3 months.
Yeah.
So whom do I trust? So I have those 3 time frames, and what did the athlete say? Well, I'm trusting the one who said it's 2 months. I will be back then. Yeah. So that's a major problem in those situations. Again, how can this athlete understand those 3 time frames? I don't understand the time frame. How shall he understand the time frames?
Yeah. So and also, it sounds like you were suggesting that the athlete's body or their healing and how they're responding to pain, whether they're experiencing pain or the meaning of that pain, should ideally guide decisions, I guess, about when the athlete is resuming. And I'm wondering, on that note, is it important for athletes to have the skill of being able to differentiate their pain, so to kind of be able to recognize, well, this, because you said before that, sometimes the athlete needs to push through some pain and rehabilitation, but other times maybe it's a sign that they need to back off or that they should be more cautious. So how does the athlete know when the pain is an indicator that they should push through or something they should work through versus when they should be more cautious? How do they develop that knowledge or awareness?
That's a very good question. We try to introduce a program in one club with junior elite athletes to develop that feeling, that ability in them. Unfortunately, we weren't successful. We try to help the athletes give feedback how their body feels before training and after training. Is there any part in your body where you experience some sensation? So it's not pain, but is there something that you experience right now? What could that mean right now? Again, referring to the comprehensibility, understanding what is happening in my body based on the training that I did yesterday, based on the things I ate during the day, maybe based on the training that we did today, so only 10 minutes ago, and use some psychoeducation, so to speak. I truly believe that some sort of those programs have to go over a longer term. So 8 weeks, 3 months, maybe even longer, a lot longer, to help athletes get a feeling for their own body. And once they have a feeling for their healthy body, they understand, once they are experiencing an injury, that there's a difference between my healthy sensations and the injured sensations.
Right.
I think that's important.
Yeah. So they need those kind of points of contrast to, differentiate. Well, here's what the healthy body feels like. Here's what, maybe different degrees of injury or pain feel like. Just out of curiosity, you said the program wasn't successful. Was that a function of time, or was it something else?
Yeah, it's been the investment time-wise that's been made by the club then and by the coaches. The physiotherapist and we tried to develop a program there, did 2 workshops on that, but it's not done with 2 workshops to develop such awareness for your own body. So I believe it it all comes back to the investment of the club, not financial investment, but how important is it to us that our athletes are holistically educated, so to speak.
Well, and that's a really interesting point, kind of in terms of the club interest, because I think that potentially could mitigate a lot of injury, right? Or like if clubs are interested in having their athletes gain a better body awareness, as you mentioned, or ability to distinguish different types of pain, that maybe it could help them prevent injuries. Maybe it could help the athletes better manage them once they do occur. I also wonder too, if part of the challenge with some of the pain management and differentiating different types of pain has to do with the culture of a lot of sport. And, you mentioned kind of the idea of hashtag emerge stronger. I suppose sport is rife with many cliches, isn't it? And, it seems like athletes internalize a lot of those cliches or beliefs. And so I wonder if that kind of also fosters into pain and how they manage it. So I guess we've kind of alluded to this already, but I want to just ask outright, would you say there are benefits that injured athletes can or do experience, or that you've observed in your work?
Most definitely. And I believe all of them are almost exclusively on the personality side of the athlete. Obviously, some really come back stronger because they spend a lot more time in the gym pushing weights. But those results are not meaningful to me in sports psychology. To me personally, it's a lot more meaningful to develop personally and grow personally from the experience of not being able to play. And again, coming back to the term of gratitude, being grateful for the opportunity to train every day, being grateful for the opportunity to play my sport every day in and day out, being grateful for being mobile, being able to move without any restrictions. And I believe that those experiences are extremely helpful for athletes and their personality. And then the question, how do I deal with challenges and obstacles? And once I've experienced any challenge, for example, in my sport due to an injury, for example, I'm able to deal better with injuries outside the sport, maybe on an academic level or personal level. In life, unfortunately or fortunately, we're facing many challenges and obstacles year in and year out. And yes, such an injury really prepares us for coping with different stressors in the future.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for every injury or illness I had in the past.
Yeah. So I guess assuming kind of one takes it as a chance to engage in some of the reflection you've been talking about and to kind of deliberate or contemplate how one can learn about themselves, or that the injury can be a benefit, it sounds like. I just wanted to go back to that point about communication. And earlier you were talking about athletes, encouraging them to ask questions, and I'm wondering if there are other things that help the athlete in terms of optimizing their communication with coaches or treatment providers. Are there things that are important for the athlete to keep in mind or consider when they're communicating with others?
Expressing their own needs, not blaming others for you didn't tell me to do that or you didn't explain that, rather saying, unfortunately, I didn't understand it the last time. And I would be grateful if you could explain that again to me. So teaching them about a productive feedback culture. How do I give feedback? Usually, it's only about teaching athletes to how do you receive feedback? What can you do if a coach gives you feedback? In such a situation right now, we're changing the roles. Suddenly, the athlete is the one who gives feedback to the physiotherapist, for example. And demands some more information for himself. Another point is preparing the conversation. For example, in a role play, what do you think? How will the communication go? What questions do you want to ask? What is most important for you? What person can you ask about this? Is the coach really the one who could answer this question? Is the physiotherapist the one is he or she the right one for that question? So having a clear plan for how to communicate with different people involved in the system is absolutely crucial.
So I love how you were talking about the fact that it sounds like you have a program almost for athletes in terms of their communication, where you help prepare the athlete for the kinds of questions that they might be asking, who they should ask those questions to, but also I think that's a great point about how they ask the question. So like sometimes I suppose it could be easy for the athlete to, you kind of mentioned the example where they're almost like blaming the provider for not giving them the information. And I imagine that could put the provider on sort of the back foot, but to, maybe just consider how they're asking for information, or sort of saying, hey, like, I didn't quite understand this from our interaction. Maybe you could repeat that, or is that what you were sort of referring to before?
Yeah, right. Exactly. And moreover, I try to help the athletes come up with other questions that they might have. Maybe they haven't been able to ask questions in the past to physicians because they've been raised well, there's a person in a white coat or green coat or whatever the physicians are wearing in the different
Yeah.
countries, and I'm not allowed to ask questions to those people, and we have to change that in some athletes,
Yeah.
so that they are really having the courage to ask, and that they understand they are allowed to ask,
Yeah.
and that's important. So both sides.
Right. Yeah, I think that's interesting because I suppose maybe there's times where there's a tendency to defer to the authority figure, right? Or to feel like one, as an athlete, one shouldn't necessarily ask questions, but it sounds like you're trying to change the mindset where they say, okay, like it's important for you to ask these questions to emerge with clarity and understanding from that interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is another very important point. Um, by asking questions, I learn what is important to me to deal with the situation, to cope with the current situation.
Mhm.
If I do not ask, if I just go there, I'm the consumer. I'm the patient. You're the authority. You
Yeah.
tell me what is my problem, and you, as the doctor, you solve my problem. And
Right.
that is not the approach that I think that we should be taking in life.
Yeah.
It's not limited to sport.
Right.
Tell me what's not working and help me understand what I can do in order to improve the situation.
Right. So it almost sounds like just by virtue of asking questions and sort of filtering out that information, that process helps the athlete take ownership of their recovery so that they're not just a passive consumer, but that they're
Exactly.
an active participant in their recovery.
Yes. Yeah.
And would you say that that's an important, how do I say, a mindset maybe for the athlete to adopt, that they're a proactive actor in their recovery, or that they sort of take ownership, I guess?
Yes, I think it's absolutely essential that athletes understand that they are responsible for the outcome of the recovery,
Mhm.
as far as it's able to responsible, because sometimes our body reacts differently. So we have to be aware of that fact. So control the controllables.
Yeah.
And I am responsible. I have to take ownership, as you just said it, for my actions, for my questions that I'm asking. And if I do not ask the question, that's my fault.
Right.
If I don't understand it and I didn't ask the question,
Yeah.
you're the one to blame.
Right. So ultimately, kind of in your role as a sports psychologist, you're helping, sounds like, athletes develop the belief, the confidence to ask, but also sort of helping them specifically about the types of questions that maybe they want to ask, or that they, that are relevant to their recovery, and again, like who to direct those questions to. Yeah, that's great thoughts in terms of communication with treatment providers. So just a couple other questions, Christian. I'm wondering, again, in your experience as a professor, as an applied sports psychologist, do you notice that there are factors that distinguish the trajectory or the path that some athletes take? Some maybe seem to emerge not necessarily stronger, but different in their recovery, whereas, let's say, different in a more facilitative or an adaptive way, whereas others are different but maybe more compromised in their recovery? And if so, what accounts for those differences?
Yeah, I believe, and that's not empirical findings. That's just now from as most of what I've been talking about today, based on my personal experience. I think acceptance is a crucial point. Accepting my situation, not fighting against the situation, is very important. It's tolerating pain, and tolerating also that I'm not able to move today or the next week. It's also, I trust the process. I trust the healthcare providers. I know that they will be doing the best possible work. That yeah, it's also their goal that I'm coming back to sport as soon as possible. It's the ability to listen to one's own body. What is it that I need today? What is it that I might need tomorrow? Um, where do I feel differently inside my body? What about the injured structures inside my body? How do they feel today? Maybe even in comparison to the x-rays that I might see, that's the objective image that I have, but what's the subjective image that I have from the ligaments, for example, or the bones?
Yeah.
And have the ability to really feel into the body and have a sound image of that. I think that's important.
Yeah.
They really use the time efficiently. They just don't lie in their bed and watch Netflix or play Fortnite. They really have a timer set for their exercises to do not only once or twice a day, but I have no idea. If it's possible to do the exercises once per hour, I set the timer on 60 minutes and do the exercises once per hour.
Yeah.
And then I think it's pushing through boundaries, pushing through the pain, and at the same time staying inside the boundaries. So not pushing, so going through the pain, but not going across the boundaries. If I could make that clear.
Yeah, sure. So, you mentioned a number of factors that might influence the course of recovery or the success of the recovery. And just in reflecting on those points, it seems like a lot of them seem to relate to the athlete themselves and kind of what they're doing, the approach that they're taking. So I thought that was interesting because, again, you sort of mentioned or alluded to the idea of controlling the controllables. And I think, like, whether it's listening to one's body or that point about acceptance or pain tolerance or use of one's time efficiently, like, it seems to a large extent that many of those things seem to be largely under the athlete's control. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of that point about trusting the process, I know earlier you said sometimes athletes don't always trust the process, or why is that the case?
I believe that once you really trust the process, that has been developed exclusively for you, together with the athletic trainers, for example, or the physiotherapist, there's no resistance. You're not fighting against something, but you're going with the flow, so to speak. And I believe that this is important because it doesn't drain any energy from you. And sometimes that might sound like a spiritual aspect of dealing with injuries or recovering from injuries, but everything that drains energy from me doesn't give me any energy, or that energy is missing inside my body to recover a little faster.
Yeah.
So I believe it's crucially important to have the ability to trust in the process, just because you are then able to focus on the important aspects of the recovery process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that a lack of trust contributes to an incoherence within the athlete? And it sounds like from your framework, you're trying to achieve a sense of coherence.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I would. Yeah,
Yeah.
say so.
And again, sort of, I really like that model where you talk about sort of helping the athlete have a sense of comprehension or comprehensibility, and the fact that something is manageable, or that they understand the meaningfulness. And I guess when all those three pieces come together, would the idea be that then they experience greater coherence in their, within themselves, that facilitate their recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason why I try to incorporate them at different points in time during the recovery process. But in the very end, all three of them are important.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's sort of really helpful just to have that kind of framework in guiding your work and your approach with the athletes. Just my last question for you is, if you were to share one piece of advice for injured athletes, what would that be?
I think it would be threefold, I think, if that's okay.
Of course. Yeah.
The first point is, I think it's important to be willing to feel what am I experiencing right now. If I'm not willing to experience the frustration, the pain, the anger, again, it might drain too much of my energy. There's that saying, suffering equals pain times resistance. So the more I resist the pain that I'm experiencing, the bigger the pain, the bigger the suffering. So if I experience a pain, which might be an injury, so it might be physiological pain or psychological pain, the more I resist that, the bigger my suffering will be. Yeah. So it's important to be willing to feel what's happening right now, and to accept, and that would be the second aspect, accept the situation and control the controllables. I believe that it's absolutely important to focus on what is important now. Michael Phelps said that many years ago. He always asked himself the question, what's important now? If you abbreviate that, it's win.
Yeah.
What's important now? And that's the most important question. Accept what you can change, and change what you can change.
Right.
And then the third point would be, in this situation right now, if you're injured, what makes a good athlete in this situation? Makes a good athlete binge watching Netflix, or makes a good athlete, you name it. You know what makes a good athlete. Yeah. And then you're working with your norms and values that are important to you as a person or to you as an athlete. And it refers to your identity. And those are the three things that I would try to get across. Be willing to feel, accept the situation, control the controllables, and try to think about what makes a good athlete in this situation.
Yeah, those are wonderful thoughts for an athlete who's injured or struggling with some challenge to consider. And I appreciate so much your willingness to share your invaluable expertise and insights, Christian, and it's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Les. I really enjoy talking about that because I think it's a very important topic, and thank you for the great questions. You really made me think about them.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, you've given me lots of food for thought too, and I love how you express many of the ideas that you shared, and I know athletes listening will certainly benefit from your insights and experience. So again, great to speak with you.
Yeah, thank you.